microphones. This is the first meeting of the Planning North Committee for this civic year. The committee is being live streamed, so I would remind you that you are on air and also to turn off your phones at this time. The first duty of this committee is to elect a chairman for the coming year, and I would therefore ask for nominations, please. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to nominate Councillor Karen Burgess. I think she did a great job steering our committee for a number of years before she did an excellent job last year as chairman of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
I'd like to second that proposal, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No. Do I take it therefore that you are all happy that Councillor Karen Burgess is nominated and recognised as chairman of this committee for the coming year? Great. Thank you. In that case, I will hand over to Councillor Burgess.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skip. The first thing to do is apologies for absence, and I have 4. The apologies are from Roy Cornell, Alan Britton, Francis Haig, Godfrey Newman and Ian Stannard. Does anybody know of any other? Councillor Kitchen.
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Christine Costin.
Thank you very
asked
much.
me to give her apologies.
The next item on the agenda is the appointment of Vice Chairman. Do I have any nominations? Councillor Vickers.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Liz Kitchen.
Thank you.
Well, Chairman, I think you asked for any seconders, but I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Are there any other nominations? Councillor Kitchen is appointed as Vice Chairman. Thank you all very much. The next thing to do is to approve the timings of the meetings for the committee for the next year. Presently they are at 17:30. I would like to keep them at the same time. Is that all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Announcements. I don't have any. Well, actually I do. I have one. On the first item on the agenda, land north of Slimfold, we now know that there has been a successful appeal. So the only thing that will be debated on this is the location of the entrance. There'll be no further debate on any other part of it. Thank you. Appeals, these are for noting. And then we move on to the first item on the agenda, DC 210109, land north of Slimfold, Lyons Road, Slimfold. Councillor Vickers.
Declarations of interest.
Oh, I'm sorry, declaration of members' interest. Councillor Mitchell.
Well, John, I don't think I need to declare it, but it's only just for absolute transparency because it's already declared in my interest. Personal interest, I'm a county councillor, but my involvement in this has only been listening to residents' representations on road access, but it's not prejudicial. I've not actually.
Councillor Vickers.
Yes, on the item 12, I'm a parish councillor in Southwater and they're speaking on this item. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
On item 10, Park Place, just for transparency to say that I have had a number of dealings with both the applicant and the objector on this as the ward councillor. But I don't consider that it's a prejudicial interest.
Okay.
Excuse me, sorry, but can we have these turned up a bit, because I couldn't hear what Councillor Fletcher was saying.
I'm a bit far away from it.
Don't have masks still. So
Is that okay now?
Councillor Fletcher, you may take off your mask when you're sitting down. Thank you. Right, as I said, first item on the agenda, over to the officer's presentation, please.
Good evening, members. This application, as the chair said, was first determined on this site back in November last year. The site relates to a parcel of land located north of the Slinfold Cricket Ground and east of Slinfold Conservation Area, with access from an unmade track extending from Lyons Road to the south. The application seeks outline permission for 24 dwellings with all matters reserved, with the exception of access, which is to be provided from Lyons Road to the south, as shown here. This application is a resubmission following the refusal of a similar scheme at the November 2020 committee meeting on account of the urbanising impact of the site access arrangements. That decision has been appealed, and we were notified yesterday that the appeal has been allowed. The site therefore now has outline planning permission for 24 dwellings with access from Lyons Road as per the access arrangement you considered in November last year. To refresh you on the scheme, this is the site in the context of the adjacent conservation area, listed buildings, rights of way, flood zone and built up area boundary. This plan shows the indicative site layout, which remains unchanged from the scheme granted planning permission yesterday. These are pictures of the site from Lyons Road, top and right, and looking south from the site at the bottom. These photos show the two rights of way that pass beside the site and the access track that leads from Lyons Road. This plan shows the access arrangement permitted yesterday, but which the council had determined would result in an unacceptably hard and urbanising impact on the rural character of Lyons Road. This is the revised access arrangement now being proposed, which reduces the amount of hard surfacing and minimises its intrusion on the Lyons Road street scene. The changes are itemised at paragraph 1.5 of the committee report and include the reduction in the width of the access road from 5.5 metres to 4.8 metres, the removal of the footpath to the west side and its replacement with a shorter linking footpath only, the retention of the hedgerow that runs west of the access, and the retention of the majority of the grass verge on the south side of Lyons Road. This is the rest of the access road, which now includes a narrower 3.7 metre wide central section and includes the retention of the hedge, as you can see on the left hand side just here with my cursor. The revisions have allowed for the retention of a further 2 trees alongside the access, with 11 additional trees still forming part of the proposals. New CGIs of the access have been provided. This is the existing arrangement facing east along Lyons Road, and this is the proposed. Note a late amendment for a drop curb to serve the existing bus stop east of the access is not shown. If you can see my cursor, that would extend across the road just here. This is the existing view west along Lyons Road, with the grass verge referred to just here. And this is the proposed view showing the realignment of Lyons Road and the retained verge just here. Again, the additional drop curb is not shown given the CGIs predate the amendment, and the drop curb would just sit across here. Given the previously refused scheme now has planning permission following yesterday's appeal decision, this application now falls to be considered effectively as an amendment to that scheme, with the only change of note being to the access arrangements. As set out in the report, officers are of the advice that the revised access arrangement appreciably reduces the urbanising impact of the new junction, allowing for the better retention of the rural approach into Slinfold. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the completion of a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have the first speaker, please? Mr. Keith Felsham. You have 2 minutes. had 2 minutes. Could you sum up, please? Thank you. Jeremy Aitchison, please. You also have 2 minutes. Thank you. John Wybrow, please. You also have 2 minutes, Mr. Wybrow. Thank you. Councillor Neil Beer from Slimford Parish Council. You do have 5 minutes, Mr. Beer. Thank you very much. Do you wish to come back on this before I go to the local members?
Yes, if I may respond to a few of the points made. In terms of the first speaker raising 3 technical matters on the highway access, these have largely been accepted by the previous inspector, albeit that the design in front of us now is slightly different. If I can just take you through the highways comments, which are paragraph 3.1 in the report under outside agencies, and you'll see that there's been 2 sets of comments from the Highways Authority which expressly cover these 3 areas. So in terms of the sight lines, visibility displays of 2.4 metres by 56 have been demonstrated. The issue, I believe, is to do with the degree of offset from the centre of the junction, and the highways officer here is clear that the offset is acceptable when applying manual for streets. In terms of the width of Lyons Road, that's shown on this diagram as being 5.5 metres. Now, manual for streets recommends that a bus route should not be on a street less than 6 metres wide. The response of the Highways Authority is that guidance is for new streets, that Lyons Road varies in width and is also quite straight at this point, so that the lack of it being 6 metres is not an issue or reason to refuse or withhold permission. In terms of the bus stop, if you can see my cursor here, the bus stop is as existing and it's located on the eastern side of the access. The initial proposals sought to, can you see that? Sorry, yes, move it to the western side here, which would put it in the line of sight of cars exiting the access, hence why there was a request to move it 15 metres
Sorry,
further.
Chair, the TV's gone off here. Sorry,
Oh,
we can't see what you're.
yeah.
Apologies.
Thank you, I can't
Thank
see
you.
that. Is that back on? Can you see it now? Okay, so I'll go back to the start on bus stop. So the existing bus stop is just here. It has no tactile paving, no crossing point. It's purely a sign in the ground. The proposal was to move it to the western side, just here. However, it would sit within the sight lines of vehicles exiting the site. And so there was a request to move it 15 plus metres further to the west. In response and following a road safety audit, it was determined to keep it in its existing position, but apply a new tactile crossing across Lyons Road. So that has been deemed to be a safe arrangement in the road safety audit and by the Highways Authority. So the advice I give is that there are no grounds and highway safety reasons to refuse an application here. In terms of just two other points, in terms of Trotty's Oak, which is, again, if you can see my cursor, this large tree on the corner here, the concern raised by the parish council is the proximity of this route to the centre of the tree. We have passed this past our tree officer, who is happy that there is space for the tree to grow over the next 40 plus years. However, just for the avoidance of doubt, we have applied or recommended condition 11, which asks for further details about that interaction, just to be on the safe side. And the final point about maintenance of the access track, we consider that to be a private matter as to whether existing residents do pay for the maintenance of that area. We otherwise would ordinarily require a management plan for all open space, but that's purely about how it's managed, not who pays. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tricia Utan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I would like to really sincerely thank our planning officers who have spent a huge amount of time and effort on trying to solve this somewhat contentious application with endless patience and good humour. I understand that this application has been submitted in response to our decision to refuse permission for an earlier application, which has now been overturned on appeal by the inspector. Regretfully, this means that the highway concerns expressed by HDC were deemed acceptable by the inspector. As the local councillor, I have listened and been well aware over the years of the amount of angst this proposed application in its varied forms have caused to the village residents. The relationship between the landowner and village residents has regretfully been one of mistrust and has compounded what was originally an approved neighbourhood plan development into a great deal of misunderstanding and unpleasantness. Slimfold is a typical village with a cricket club, a church, a pub, village hall, school and a village shop, and endless voluntary organisations. All these components play a vital part in ensuring that the village is a desirable place to live, and it's sad that there is such a division in the hitherto peaceful ambience caused by this application. The original neighbourhood plan included Crosby Farm and a much-needed scout hut and a cricket club. Over time, the scout hut was dropped from the proposal, and also the promise of low-level 2- and 3-bedroom dwellings suitable for downsizing by local residents who needed to do so whilst maintaining close proximity to the heart of the village. However, the cricket club wholeheartedly support this application as they have a need for a new clubhouse, as the original existing building has fallen into a parlous state. The supporters of this application are understandably most anxious that this application is agreed in order for the developer to build the new cricket clubhouse in order to enhance their English cricket board status and also to enable them to have a higher income by utilising their club for various functions which have been held at either the village hall or the pub. The objectors have unfortunately been vilified by the cricket club supporters as being obstructive and causing delays, which in turn frustrate the supporters who are anxious to have their new clubhouse. The objectors are not anti-cricket, as this quintessential game, played throughout village cricket greens the length and breadth of England, is a sight we all love and enjoy, and Slimfold Cricket Club has been in continuous use for well over 100 years. But they are seriously concerned at the prospect of losing the rural aspect that the village cricket pitch enjoys, whilst abutting the conservation area. There are also concerns about the impact of barn owls, which have lived and hunted the field to be developed for many years. There are slow worms, which are also protected, and no real understanding of the severity of loss of habitat has been addressed by the landowner. I recognise the concerns regarding the highway access. However, the inspector has determined that the access as outlined in the previous application is acceptable, and this new application actually addresses some of those concerns. There is also concern that a dedicated public right-of-way may not be as stated, but will only be used for residents of the newly built houses, and not as previously used by all residents before the present owner closed it. I understand that this is covered by a legal agreement. Pedestrian access to the village from this development is also of concern, as you have all heard, with no apparent solution at this time. As a local member, I am unwilling to vote against my parish council, but I do find myself in the difficult position of understanding the very real concerns expressed by the objectors, who speak not for any reason other than concern to try to protect their village from a development that they feel would seriously cause detriment to it. Whilst I also understand the cricket club members who see only the benefit for their club, thus overriding all other concerns. I would therefore like to query the number of conditions that have been put on this application by our planning team, and suggest that this number of conditions can be seen as recommending what has been essentially a very difficult case, but nevertheless is recommended by officers if all conditions are met. Finally, and most importantly, may I please ask exactly how enforceable the conditions are, and I request that the various queries raised at this meeting be given consideration by our planning team. Thank you for listening.
Do you want to address those matters now?
Yes, very, very quickly. Just 2 points raised that I think I just need to clarify. In terms of the right of way, the previous scheme included a separate footpath, you can see my cursor running west of the access, which was to be a dedicated right of way linking Lance Road to the existing network to the north of the site. Given the scheme has reduced and removed that footpath, the footpath effectively forms a shared surface with the access. So the county rights of way officer is not prepared to accept it as a dedicated right of way, but it'll be a permissive one, and that's secured through the legal agreement, and that would require or allow secure public access for a period usually of around 20 years. In terms of the conditions, the number we have attached is proportionate to the scale and nature of this development, and we consider they meet the tests of the NPPF in that they are all fully enforceable. Thank you.
Councillor Stuart Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's fair to say that Councillor Newton has spoken extremely well and eloquently on this subject, and there's very little I can add. I do think it is a matter of regret that this application has polarised opinion within Slimfold, and I hope over time that will ease. But given the decision of the inspectorate, which I think was announced yesterday, it's quite clear what the direction of travel is on this application. So subject to what other members have to say, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Claire Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Clearly we're in a slightly unusual situation here this evening, where the current application has already been agreed on appeal, the previous application, sorry, and this application was submitted to try and overcome the concerns for the reason for refusal last time. If we approve this application, which has some real merits over the previous one, can the officers confirm that that would give the applicant the option to implement either of those applications, and therefore he would have the ability to implement one or the other?
That's correct, yes. There'll be 2 permissions sitting on this site. Thank you.
Councillor Christian Mitchell.
Chairman, I think Councillor Newton has put matters excellently, as Councillor Ritchie said, that residents, as all residents before this committee, have come to this committee and before with well understood and well-founded concerns, but the rug really has been taken from under us as recently as yesterday. So what I wanted to say in respect of the highways matters, which one of the public speakers raised, Mr. Feltham, who many of us know and respect, but as our officers advise us, largely, particularly on highways matters, this has been resolved by the inspector, and any areas that we think we might have discretion on, the Highways Authority have advised that, in fact, has been put through our planning officer tonight, that in fact we don't have discretion. There is clear guidance on that. And so whilst I think the highways is understandably a matter of concern, since actually that's been largely dealt with, there's very little that we could do. The inspector has given a view on it. We're not able to overturn that decision. That's for a court now to do if somebody disagrees. So I think really it's, as Councillor Newton and Councillor Richards said, it's now actually about going forward on what we've got now. And as the Chairman of the Parish parish council said, is actually through a lot of hard work from all involved, it's much better than where it had at one place been. So I will be supporting the application.
Councillor Fletcher.
Could I just ask for a clarification from the officer about the rights of way? It sounded to me as though you were saying that West Sussex wouldn't accept a public right of way along the road, but the paperwork here is saying I would consider it better to secure permissive access than no public access at all, given that the previous proposal for a dedicated footpath failed. So I don't actually understand the situation here, because why would it not have been possible to have a dedicated right of way along the road?
Yes, so just to clarify, we did have a conversation with the rights of way officer about this, and the right of way should normally be a 2.5 metre segregated footway in order to be dedicated. That's the standard that the county work to. So here that would require extra infrastructure west of the hedge, west of the access road, which would eat into quite a lot of the land there. So the proposal in front of us is for the access road to be a shared surface. Now, as the county wouldn't accept that as a dedicated right of way, they said instead the next best alternative is for it to be a permissive right of way, which is effectively a kind of contract effectively between the landowner and the county, that for 20 years public right had the right to walk up and down that access road to link in with the rights of way that exist to the north.
So the road, the carriageway itself is not going to be adopted, or would there not be an automatic right to walk along it as well?
In terms of the final adoption, I believe it would remain private, but it would be a right of way that through the agreement with the county that the public would have access across it.
That's really disappointing to lose that right and replace it with a time limited permissive right.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't want to say very much. Just coming to the ecology, though, there is the question of a survey about the barn owls. I'm very conscious that they're protected. Are we going to have another survey, as the last one is out of date? And it is mentioned in 660.
That's an interesting point. I will just check the conditions to make sure that it is covered off. We do certainly have a number of ecology ones here, so please bear with me.
I'd be grateful. I couldn't see anything in the conditions about that, but
we can apply a condition accordingly to reflect that. I know it does say at the end of paragraph 6.60, as you say, that a further survey should be secured as a condition of any consent. And just for the absolute avoidance of doubt, we can apply a condition to that effect. Thank you.
okay, so you'll check that when the time comes, yeah? You'll keep an eye on that.
Correct, yes.
Can I just ask one other question, if that's all right, Chair? The surveys assess the presence of various species, etc., in 656. Ecological mitigations and enhancements have been recommended as part of the reports. Did that include the use in building material of bat roosts and also swift roosts or access for them?
It's a question I don't have the exact answer to my fingertips, but ordinarily a number of bats were recorded in the existing barns in the northeast corner of the site, and there's a mitigation strategy for them that would normally include replacement roosts, etc. The hedgerow that runs north-south next to those existing barns is to be relocated. located further to the west in the open space, and the ecology report does recommend the species of planting that needs to go in there, because that hedgerow provides a commuting route for bats within the men's SAC area.
Yeah, can I ask one further question? Sorry to delay things a little bit, but I'm quite keen on this. It doesn't talk about, obviously, housing requirements in this report, and obviously it's probably for later. But are we, as a council, insisting that new houses built will have access bricks in them for both swifts and bats?
We don't directly condition that. Usually that comes forward through recommendations in an ecology report responding to the bats present on and around the site. Unfortunately, I don't have the report directly in front of me, but it certainly sets out appropriate mitigation within there that normally does include such measures. But as I say, we don't, as a matter of course, apply it every time. Thank you.
If I could just comment on that as well. I haven't checked regularly, but I know we were still waiting for royal assent for the 10% biodiversity net gain. And obviously that will be reflected in our new policies in our local plan. So we have to work from the current framework, which doesn't require that as an absolute, although obviously we would encourage it. So going forward, there will be further environmental mitigation and improvement measures in our developments, but we have to work within the current local plan and the current national legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. As there appear to be no further speakers, we'll go to the vote. The recommendation is to approve outline planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and the completion of a section 106 legal agreement and the additional conditions which have been the Barnow conditions. Time to vote. All those in favour of this, please raise your hand. Those against? And any abstentions? You came in late, didn't you, Councillor? Yeah, Councillor Allen, thank you. That's the reason he didn't. Right, moving swiftly on, agenda item 10.
Chairman, could I ask before you move on that officers and members could speak into their microphones? Because looking around the room, I'm not the only one who's finding it incredibly difficult to hear.
Yeah, okay, all moving
I'm sorry,
microphones
April, you
closer.
were very difficult to hear. So I know it may not be natural, but if they could speak into the microphones, it would be better.
Okay,
Thank
you,
you.
Councillor Kitchen. Just to confirm that that vote was carried. Agenda item 10, DC 210137 4 Park Place, Horsham. Officers report, please. Oh, yeah.
Yes, my colleague Guy is going to be presenting this one. He's just showing the speakers out.
Chairman, just to let you know that the speaker, David Abbott, on the next item hasn't appeared yet. So there'll be no speakers on the next item. But after the next item's over, could you just pause and then I'll bring through the speakers for the item after. Thank you.
Okay, so before the presentation for this next item, additional representations were received from the current occupant of the premises, stating that the current business is viable, and also from the applicant seeking longer hours than those allowed for in condition 6 of the recommendation. So the application relates to a mid-terrace commercial unit on Park Place in central Horsham. The site is identified by the red line and is within the Horsham Conservation Area, which is shown by the blue line, with neighbouring listed buildings shown by the yellow stars. The site, which is the one with the pink frontage, comprises a cafe with ancillary retail at all levels, and this use was approved in 2020. So here we have the existing ground and basement levels, and the first and second floor levels, which provide seating areas and staff areas respectively. The application seeks consent for a change of use to create a Class E unit at ground and basement levels and a maisonette at first and second floor levels. So this is the proposed Class E unit, and Class E was introduced last year to essentially amalgamate a number of formerly separate use classes. So a Class E use at these levels would allow retail units, cafes, financial professional services, offices, medical services, and that kind of ilk. So a Class E use would also allow the existing occupant to stay in the premises should they choose. At first and second floor levels, a 2-bedroom maisonette is proposed. The change of use at upper floor levels would create a 2-bedroom unit dwelling. Upper floor levels of adjoining properties are similarly residential, and there's no evidence to suggest the loss of this commercial floor space would prejudice for future occupancy at ground floor and basement levels. The presence of a dwelling above a commercial unit does create potential for noise disturbance for future occupants, with conditions recommended to provide controls over the nature of the Class E use and its opening hours. And subject to these conditions, the resulting relationship is considered acceptable in amenity terms. The application also proposes external alterations, with new first floor window opening proposed to the front elevation in PVC, and that would match the existing design. And to the rear, a new external staircase is proposed to access the flats, and that's this part of the site here, with an enlarged second floor window opening here to serve the proposed residential dwelling. These alterations would reflect those present in adjoining properties, and again is considered acceptable to the locality. The site is an essential location with parking restrictions in place and neighbouring public car parks. And on this basis, there's no objection to the lack of parking provision, and no parking can be provided on site in any case. So the application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Thank you. As the speaker hasn't turned up, go straight to the local member, which is Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much. This is a business area that's had a very, very difficult time recently, because not just have they suffered from COVID like the rest of the businesses in the town, but they had really very substantial disruption because of the building of Perry's Place car park, and that affected the business for a long period. I can fully understand why the owners would want to have the option to have a residential on the top floors, as is happening in lots of other units around the town. And I have huge sympathy for the tenants who are trying to make a go of a business with the current COVID restrictions. My main concern about this as a planning application is to do with the conservation aspects of it. I don't think those pictures do it justice. It's a particularly lovely building in quite a prominent position, because as you walk out of Perry's Place, it's straight in front of you. And there are a lovely run of buildings along there, and this one is particularly nice because it still retains its existing wooden windows and the old ground floor windows as well. What worries me about this application is that the conservation report was raised quite a strong objection to replacing the windows with UPVC and saying that they wouldn't be equivalent to the existing wooden windows. And when you go on site, you can see the wooden windows have very specific detailing that's not reflected in UPVC. And as you look along the row of buildings, you can see that half of them have got UPVC now and half of them hasn't. And the UPVC definitely has a detrimental impact on the character of the scene. So if you look at whether or not this objection is of sort of significance, there's a whole raft of paragraphs in the officer's report explaining why it is significant. In Blueprint says that changes should preserve and enhance the character area, and in PPF 127 talks about being sympathetic to local character and history. In paragraph 6.18 of the officer's report, it quotes NPPF paragraph 193 that says that great weight should be given to the asset's conservation. So in the light of the conservation officer's report, I think that we are not really giving great weight to the conservation of this asset. In paragraph 6.25, it does talk about the use of UPVC is established, and therefore it's unreasonable to object. But the use of, just because part of the character has been eroded by UPVC, and in one case nearby, apparently because it was a reluctant compromise, I believe, because otherwise there was a fear of there would be a total loss of the character, doesn't mean that every single remaining wooden window should be up for grabs for replacement with UPVC. There isn't any, there's no justification being given as to why the applicant couldn't have replaced the window as part of this major refurbishment with a wooden equivalent, or repaired it, depending on the condition. So I'm really unhappy about that aspect of this. We're building a lot of new stuff around the town. We have a relatively small amount of old heritage buildings, and we ought to be treasuring them and looking after them, and not allowing the creeping spread of lower standard of unsympathetic changes in a conservation area.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I think as officers, we were very mindful of the fact that we'd granted planning permission in 2015 for PVC at the neighbouring sites, and in 2015 the site was still a conservation area. Therefore, how could we justify a different approach on this site in this particular instance? Because the end result is the same in effect, although the reasons behind it might have been different. The impact on a conservation area is the same for both properties. I think if members have a fundamental concern about perhaps the lack of detail about the replacement window, we could quite easily amend condition 8 of the recommendation, because at the moment condition 8 requires the scheme to be implemented as per this drawing, which is not particularly detailed. We could require further details prior to any installation of the window to make sure the sections are a true reflection of what's there now, to make sure it's appropriate to what's special about the conservation area.
Thank you. Just on clarification of that, the Conservation Officer's report specifically says something to the effect of wood is the appropriate material. Hang on. The historically appropriate material for the windows of a building of this period is timber with a painted finish. It is also suggested that timber is more environmentally sustainable. So would we be able to condition that?
As officers, I don't think we could object to PVC, but if as members you feel it has to have timber windows to be acceptable, we could rephrase the condition to say along the lines of, notwithstanding the submitted plans, no replacement window should be installed until details of a timber window have been submitted to and approved in writing by.
So in that case, could I propose an amendment that we add that condition, including the wording about timber windows, and that we continue the debate on that amendment.
Is anybody going to second that? Councillor Tony Bradnan, thank you. Councillor Bradnan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too share the concerns of Councillor Fletcher over the UPVC as opposed to wood. There are far too many buildings around the country where things have been allowed to slip, and I just think two wrongs don't make a right, and just because we've already got some UPVC down there doesn't mean they've all got to turn over to plastic. So I do support the view that it should be wooden windows. I mean, as you say, they're doing a major refurbishment. Why haven't they allocated that to be wooden sash cord or whatever they are? Can I just go back to this? Oh dear, I've forgotten the use E. That's not. I'm not. The Class C. Sorry, the Class C. Been so long since I've been here, I can't remember what these things are. Did I understand you when you said that it actually covers a multitude of different uses? Some instances, perhaps.
Yes, a Class C would include shops, cafes, restaurants, offices, medical, dentists, doctors, banks, building societies, indoor leisure is in there as well. But because Class C is so all-encompassing, we have recommended a condition to take out some elements of Class C which we wouldn't think were suitable in this location. So it takes out indoor leisure, light industrial processes, and day nursery and creches. So it's Class C, but a more pulled back version of it.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was concerned about these multiple uses. So yeah, that's happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor Andrew Baldwin.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have a problem really with what is proposed. What I find quite extraordinary is that if this is a conservation area, how did they get away with painting it pink? I'd rather have UPVC windows in a non-pink building than wooden windows in a pink building. But I will be supporting the application. But I just find it peculiar that in a conservation area they're allowed to get away with a pink building.
Councillor Matthew Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question on condition 6. How would the hours decided on? Because if it's going to be a cafe or something similar in the future, it seems to be putting them at a disadvantage to other businesses in the area which may have more lenient times.
Yes, so condition 6 reflects the opening hours of the existing premises on the site, which was approved last year. And the same discussion was had as part of that application. And 9:30 and 5 were settled on as closing times because of the adjoining flats either side, upper floor levels. And we didn't have any noise assessments to demonstrate that later opening times wouldn't disturb those properties. And I think that approach was appealed, and the inspector agreed that in the absence of information to demonstrate longer hours could be accommodated, it was appropriate to condition shorter time. So it does reflect what's existing. It doesn't mean it can't be changed in the future, but we need more information to justify the change. Yeah.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
Thanks. Just a couple of points. First, pink, and I think I'm exhibiting pink right now, is fairly prevalent in a lot of conservation areas, especially of this time. But notwithstanding that, I'd like to make a plea for UPVC windows. Wooden windows, having tried to paint them for years, will last unpainted, having been repainted for probably 2 or 3 years, not much more. And as soon as they start to lose the paint, they start looking awful. If you get sophisticated and good UPVC windows, they would look almost identical, either sash or opening, to what is there in the first place. But you will save a lot of money, you will save a lot of time in redecoration, and you'll keep the impression, if you choose the right ones. So you need to spend money. So as we're talking about UPC windows, I think as an amendment, we are getting a bit lost here, but it is an amendment proposed and seconded. I don't agree with it. I think UPC is a very good alternative if it is chosen properly. Thanks.
Does anybody else wish to say anything before we go to the vote? Nope. Okay. Well, the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and the amendments which have been raised this evening. So those all in favour, please raise your hand. And those against? And any abstentions? Yeah. Right, that's been carried. Thank you, everybody. Now we've got to wait a few minutes before the next brought in. Yeah. Agenda item 11, DC 210333, Horsham Amateur Boxing Club, North Parade, Horsham. Over to you, Guy.
Thank you. So this application relates to Horsham Boxing Club, which is located in a single-storey building immediately adjoining North Parade Car Park to the west of Horsham Park. The application proposes a single-storey side extension with the location of extension shown by the greyed area on the left-hand plan. So this is the existing building, which has a fairly functional appearance, and the proposed extension shown by the area coloured brown. So here we have some photos of the existing building, which also show the location of the proposed extension. So the proposal would provide an enhanced sports facility on an established site with the design and amenity impacts considered acceptable given the existing arrangement. The parking facilities provided by North Parade Car Park would be sufficient to support the development, and no impact on highways has been identified. The extension would be sited within the root protection area of a neighbouring tree, which is shown on the top left photograph, and would also require some works to the lower branches to accommodate the height of the extension. The council's tree officer has though raised no objection to the proposal, with conditions 3 and 4 of the recommendation considered sufficient to minimise the potential for harm. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Thank you. One of our speakers has had to withdraw because he's had to go and open up the boxing club, so I'm going to let somebody else have his 2 minutes. So, Mr. John Essex, you can have 4 minutes if you'd like to come to the speaker.
Hello. I haven't really come to ask many questions of the committee, just that we've probably come along to answer any questions that you might have regarding the club. We're here, I think most of the things that we put forward are basically what we do need to extend the club to improve the amount of people we've got now to let phoning in to come and join. It's since the lockdown, the applicants have doubled just since the lockdown. So we've got a definite reason to want to extend the club.
Do you have anything else? Because we actually don't ask you questions. It's you tell us your points of view and we listen, and then.
Yeah, as I say, there's not really a lot for us to say, just that we've maintained the building ourselves for the last 25 years. I was part of the original club when we took over the toilet block and converted it into a gym. And since then, as I say, the club has just grown so big now with members that we really do need a bigger premises.
Okay, Mr. Essex, thank you very much. Okay, if you've not got anything to add, I'll ask the next speaker to come and speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Libby Baker, would you like to come and have your time?
So yeah, I'm the team captain at Horsham Boxing Club, and I joined when I was 16, quite shy. And it's really helped me and many others that I've seen since I've been there, gaining confidence and fitness and everything. And it's really, I've watched so many people grow since they've been there, as well as myself. So I think it's quite important that other people and other children of that age get that opportunity, because we don't want to have to be turning people away due to not having enough space for them. So I think it would be really important that we can offer that to other children of that age, so I could see more people grow and develop like I did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll ask the local member, which is Councillor Fletcher, if she has anything to say on this.
Thank you very much. As the report says, it's functional and unobtrusive building, or possibly in the competition for one of the least pretty buildings in the town, but it is actually, fortunately, quite an unobtrusive building. And I'm very pleased that the boxing club is in a position to be needing to expand. And it does seem like a sensible and modest expansion, which has taken care not to damage the tree roots, and should be fairly readily reversible if that was ever needed. I am concerned that this is another case of nibbling away at the open space in the park, but it is for a good cause, and I would like to think that it's not taken as a precedent to reinforce it, build it bigger, higher, and further expand in the future, so that it becomes a much more dominant structure. But as it is, the extension will keep it being a relatively modest and unobtrusive building that seems to be well suited for its function. one of the recommendations from West Sussex County Council was that the cycle parking should be reviewed. And since the cycle parking will be in the same area as is used by the general public rather than be separate cycle parking, and we should be looking to review and improve our cycle parking generally in line with the government's ambitions to increase cycling through its gear change policy, I would like to request whether we could slightly amend the conditions of the wording of one of the conditions, just to ask that the review of the cycle parking is done in consultation with the local members so that we can consider the wider aspects of that.
Yeah, to achieve that, we can leave the wording as it is, but make sure there's a post-committee report to note that once details come into that condition, it's in consultation with local members. Yeah.
I'd just like to add that I think it's a brilliant idea to use a redundant lavatory block and turn it into a club area for youngsters and people of all ages and all abilities. And I fully commend the boxing club for doing this. You have my admiration and my respect and my vote. Which is what we'll come to now if nobody else has got anything to say. The recommendation is to approve planning commission subject to appropriate conditions. All those in favour, please vote. And those against? And any abstentions? The vote is carried. Thank you. I think we've got some more people coming in, so I'd be grateful if you wouldn't mind leaving. Thank you. Oh, are you? You are the people for the next? Oh, you are. Okay, right. Thank you. Right. Agenda item 12, DC 210087, land north of Wilberforce Way, Southwater.
Good evening. Hopefully this microphone is closer. Can you all hear me correctly now? Thank you. So this application seeks to amend the operating hours for commercial development located at the northern end of the Oakhurst Business Park in Southwater. This plan shows the 2 units that received planning permission in February last year but have yet to be built. This is the site in its wider context, with the residential development at Martindale sitting in close proximity immediately to the west. The remainder of the business park sits to the south. This plan shows the public right-of-way that splits the site in half. A new acoustic fence is also proposed as part of this current application, shown here in light blue at the rear of the southern unit. This is the site as existing, looking west along the public right-of-way, with the site of Unit 1 to the left and the site of Unit 2 to the right. The properties on Martindales are behind the narrow tree band rear of Unit 2. These photos show those properties on Martindales as seen from the right of way as it passes through the tree buffer. As originally submitted, the application sought the complete removal of condition 25 of the planning permission to allow for unrestricted 24-hour site operations. The justification for this was on the basis that the current restrictions were proving to be too prohibitive for prospective occupants who required more flexibility given their working practices. Condition 25 currently restricts all operations to between 7 AM and 6 PM Monday to Friday, and from 7 AM to 1 PM on Saturdays. Given the proximity of the houses at Martindales to the rear, the key consideration is the impact of any variance to condition 25 on their amenities. The recommendation of officers is that condition 25 be instead varied as set out at paragraph 1.3 of the report to allow for 24-hour internal operations that do not involve manufacturing or industrial processes, with those processes restricted to between 7 AM and 8 PM Monday to Fridays, and from 7 AM to 6 p.m. on Saturdays. The same restrictions would apply to all deliveries and dispatches. Since the publication of the agenda, one further objection has been received from a resident at Martindale's, raising concern over noise impacts still that would occur from 24-hour internal operations only. Taking into account the valid concerns and evidence that the current operational hours are prohibiting occupiers taking on the premises, and the clear concerns raised by local residents, officers are of the view that these new restrictions strike an appropriate balance to continue to appropriately protect neighbouring residents. Members are advised that all remaining conditions, including those requiring details of external plant, sound insulation works to the building fabric, and a noise management plan for each unit, as set out in paragraph 6.22, would continue to apply. The application is recommended for approval accordingly, with condition 25 varied rather than removed. Please note that condition 25 as written contains an unfortunate typo and should state that, and this is in the second part, no dispatch or receipt or delivery shall take place from the site except, and that's the word that's unfortunately missing, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, 7 to 6 p.m. Saturdays, and not at all on Sundays, bank holidays or public holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. The first of our speakers is James Sanderson. If you'd like to take the microphone, please. You have 2 minutes, Mr. Sanderson.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me speak. My first comment is on the original application. We're probably too late to consider that, but DC 19-0123, that was passed, but that was only passed with 8 rejections, and I'm not sure that the local community were aware it was even happening. I'm in Martindale's. I myself was not aware that it was happening, so I'm curious how it was able to pass, because this adjustment has received 63 rejections or objections, as I understand. So if the first application were to be redone, I think it would receive significant opposition. My second point is I don't understand why the first objection was submitted with the restrictions, and then now they've decided those restrictions are not suitable. I don't understand how the company would have had a marketing research process done to talk to prospective clients with the restrictions in the original application to get it approved, to then say, actually, we need to change to 24/7. Notice the photos that you took there. Curious why the trees have already been chopped down of the location. I didn't think that any work was able to take place on the site until the actual application was finalised. So I am curious that they've been able to clear the ground, and I wonder if they're trying to clear the ground so that then it looks a mess, in which case we can move on with any application that we're pushing through. Of the 63 rejections that there were, I'm curious how many there would be if this proposed amendment was sent back. Or is this proposed amendment now going to pass through the council now without the houses in Martindale's being able to talk? I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you guys now. Other people wanted to come and talk, but they're on shift patterns, which is the reason why people objected to the 24/7. So amending the time now is kind of like almost like planning by stealth, if you like. And then the final question, if this were to be approved, I had a question on the section 106, or if it's now called the Community Infrastructure Levy. How much is there as a result of this, and what is the intention for the council to spend that on? Because for the Martindale's development, there has apparently been some equivalent monies which have not been deployed in the way that was expected to from the original planning. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Natasha Bragon, please. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm coming from a more, I live there, I have a personal view. So I've been a resident of Martindale's for over 7 years, and I'm extremely upset at the prospect of a large working unit and office being erected just metres from my bedroom window. There were many objections logged when the 24/7 access was requested. The company had already gained planning permission and were told at the start that they would not get 24/7. It feels very underhand that once they got the permission, they then changed their request. Using the fact that the prospective occupiers are only interested in units, should they have this. This clearly shows there was no need for these units, otherwise they would have had potential occupiers ready and waiting, happy to work within the restrictions. Once objections began to raise, they changed their request yet again, but instead of it being a new request, it was just added in. There is absolutely no way that they will not be making noise outside of the units for the hours requested. Staff are entitled to breaks where they may want to go outside for fresh air, smoke or a walk. You're not telling me that they're going to lock their workers up overnight and not allow them outside. The added noise and pollution and traffic is something that must be considered. Not only yesterday, I pulled out of Martindale's 2 HGV lorries parked up each side of the road and 2 learner drivers. I can only imagine the backlog of vehicles a logistics company will produce. There is no space for the number of vans they propose in the area they suggest. Simply put, they will just be queued up along Blakes Farm Road. Within Martindales, we have a very large number of children who most live within close proximity of the proposed build. Light from the units and noise will make sleeping near impossible. Added to the children, we have a selection of shift workers. Currently, we are lucky enough to hear minimal noise from the industrial units because they work within restricted hours. A building this close to us will cause all sorts of disturbance through the night. The public footpath is our only safe access in and out on foot. It links us to the village and is a vital bus stop for not only for the residents but also school children and workers from the industrial estate. The proposed build will include large moving vehicles running across this path, causing a danger to anyone. In the current climate, I cannot believe this is even being considered. We are now moving towards a majority of work from home culture. To build new units, including an office, when many companies are giving up their current spaces, is beyond me. On top of that, there are currently empty units in Oakhurst. These should be occupied before any more are built. Please stop and think about the wider impact. Visit our estate and see yourselves just how close we will be to our homes and the effect this will have on our neighbourhood and our future generation.
Thank you. James Hicks. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Hicks, as you heard. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and agent for this application. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you at this evening's meeting. I'd like to reaffirm the collaborative approach we've taken working with your officers. Carbide Properties are committed to delivering high quality, usable employment buildings on allocated sites which are suitable for employment investment and job creation. Following the original grant of planning permission and subsequent marketing to potential occupiers, it is clear that the restriction on the operating hours imposed by this council is preventing uptake and occupation. A number of occupiers have genuinely walked away from discussions once they're aware of that restriction. This is not because they want to work intensively through the night. Moreover, they require some flexibility to allow their businesses to grow and develop. The current amendment to Condition 25 to widen operating hours has been discussed with officers, and the proposed amendment before you today is the result of collaboration to find a suitable middle ground that the officers and occupiers are both content with. It should be noted that evidence has been put forward from our acoustic consultant that's demonstrated that there would be no impact upon the residential amenities of the neighbouring properties as a result of that amended condition when assessed against the standard, that's British Standard 4142. Finally, the existing conditions upon the consent requiring further information in respect of sound insulation and noise breakout from the units remain and will give further control to the council over the future operation of these premises. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Derek Moore, Southwater Parish Council. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to come and explain our views. We're very keen to have employment and businesses within the area, but we feel that in this respect, this development and the intentions here to change the operating hours is probably premature because the application is to make it 24/7. Now there is a slight amendment there in the proposal being that the hours that overnight would be limited to the inside the building, but to expect an industrial unit to be quiet during a closed session, I think is not really realistic. We recognise that there will be conflict when commercial units border residential areas, but the initial assessment that took place took this into account. Now the building of these units hasn't been completed, and this is all due to the appointed agent's view that there's difficulty in letting these units. Now, we would make a point that this is in the middle of a pandemic. The situation is changed at the moment, and therefore making this hasty decision is one, premature, and the proposals do very little to mitigate the effect of noise and traffic on the residents. We would suggest that this application at the moment is withdrawn and the units continue to be marketed. If after a further period of time there is a real difficulty in this, then it can be reviewed. But this should be done in consultation with the affected residents. One, to move away from the 24/7, but to make sure that it does actually have, it's bearable on both sides. I think to initially apply a policy to protect the residents, we've to be careful that we just don't change things just to suit the commercial viability of letting them. And that forms our basis of the objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Which one of the local members wishes to go? Sorry, do you want to come back on any of those points? No. Which one do you want to go first? Councillor Claire Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. The original planning application for these units applied limited hours for very good reasons, to protect the amenity of nearby residents in Martindales. Just because these units are proving difficult to let in the midst of a pandemic does not, in my opinion, justify extending the working hours beyond those already approved. Once this pandemic is finally over, and I hope that will be soon, it may be possible to let these buildings with the current hours of use already agreed. I do, of course, support economic development, especially in the Southwater, but I'm not convinced that internal operation only will be easy to enforce, or that internal operation all night will not cause harm to nearby residents. For this reason, I'm asking the committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greening.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone involved in this planning application, especially the case officers and Adrian for your presentation. This application, as we heard, dates back to the approval of DC 190123, submitted in January 2019, and against my better judgment and support for economic development, I didn't call in this application to committee. With hindsight, this probably was a mistake. Back in 2019, Environmental Health were raising concerns that the development and proposal had not been designed to, and I'm quoting from the report at the time, had not been designed to reduce exposure to noise in accordance with the MPPF and to achieve good design. In the 2019 report, the Environmental Health Officer cited the World Health Organization. I think they've been busy in the last 2 years, and they said that the sound should not exceed 45 decibels. But crucially, the WHO in their guidance for community noise says that to protect sensitive persons, a lower guidance, a lower volume would be preferred. In 2019 as well, our Environmental Health Officer had concerns given the proximity of development to adjacent dwellings. Now, in 4.5 years, I've only called in a handful of applications. I do accept the principle of development, but it was a huge error, as we've heard, for the applicant to hack down the trees and the biodiversity loss of the site. And it is a shame that with over 700 views, I've read the marketing report by the applicant, that only 2 parties are interested in the site at the moment. The outcry of public objection, 60 plus objections, is noticeable and shows that residents do want to support local businesses but cannot accept 24/7 city living, as we are a rural district. Indeed, when Martindales was built, many residents would have known that they were moving near to an industrial park. I do have a question for the officers at this point, if that's okay, please. The Public Right-of-Way Officer, Nigel Bird, says in his response, dated the 25th of January 2021, related to the closure of the footpath 1669, quote, having reviewed the information supplemented, it is unclear how the existing public right-of-way is to be accommodated. A holding objection is lodged pending further information. Am I still correct that, as per 3.5, the public right-of-way officer is still objecting? And I'll stop at that point to ask a question, if that's okay, please, Adrian.
My understanding is that the objection is maintained, but we have a planning permission on the site that protects the right-of-way running through the site that is operational and would remain so after the development is completed.
Thank you. If I may continue. Thank you, Adrian, for that. Moving on, I think 24 hours a day is excessive beyond belief, and the Environmental Health Officer in his report of the 26th of February this year says there is significant concern that granting of permission for 24-hour operation will create a pressure for other businesses at the park to be permitted for the same facility. So this sets a dangerous precedent. As objectors note, we are a rural district, and people move here to escape urbanisation and the non-stop 24/7 of city life. Furthermore, the Environmental Health Officer challenges the noise assessment criteria, known as we've heard as BS 4142, and having mathematical modelling limitations, and should not be used in areas of low background noise, especially, and this is especially true at night. Furthermore, the Environmental Health Officer disagrees with the I think it's Hawley, mentioned by the applicant, the applicant's consultant, and challenges the updated acoustic assessment, and that it would have no adverse effect. And the Environmental Health Officer says it is unlikely to be representative of how noise will be perceived by local residents. So in conclusion, I think residents' quality of life is clearly going to be interrupted and affected by this 24/7 proposal. I would ask the applicant to stick to the original application. Economics and businesses should have a social conscience, especially to their neighbours. Conditions and mitigations may be well, but once the horse is bolted, we're on a very slippery slope. Therefore, we cannot have economic growth at the detrimental cost to our residents' physical and mental health. We have to have a balance. And for me here, the balance is with our residents and the Environmental Health Officer. The negative impacts of the development would outweigh the harm to the local community. And just to finish, this is not related to the planning application, but if we could urge the Highways Authority to unlock the Section 106 money to build the footpath that the residents of Martindales have been promised. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Burgess.
Thank you. I've got a noise meter on here. While Billy was speaking, it was nearly up to 60. Right now, when everybody's quiet, it's about 45, which is quoted in here. So the noise level should be no higher than that, out of interest. I'm just thinking, we drove round there on Sunday. The Martindale site is very high intensity. Houses are very close, there are flats, car parking everywhere, and the roads are very narrow. I'm only saying that to say that this is a high density area where people live, and it's not very far. I think Unit 1, if I have it right, is probably well clear, and that could probably take a bit more, but the one towards the top of the picture is very close to where all these houses are. Why is our developer asking? Because he says, and I haven't seen any justification apart from word of mouth, that he can't sell these buildings with the current quite wide restrictions which exist. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't normally put industrial units very close to high density building. And I think though there may be scope for some expansion, I simply do not agree, and having listened to the people who live there, who've got young children, shift workers and things like that, I simply do not agree to the extent that these are going forward. And I'm sorry, HGV vehicles at 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning are going to make one heck of a racket. And I'm sorry to say that if you've got a start time of 7 o'clock or an end time of 8 o'clock, that's when the trucks will arrive. If you go down more towards my part, where they're not allowed access to the dump, the industrial facility until 8 o'clock, you'll see lines of trucks all in the lay-bys. So that's what will happen here. And I'm sorry to cut a long diatribe short. I will say that I really think that though there may be scope for some extension of hours, nothing like which is put forward here, especially the 24-hour one for internal on-site. It just won't work. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chair. Could I suggest an amendment to conditions on 1.3 to the fallback position, which is actually condition 25 of the regulatory conditions? Adrian, is that okay?
So yes, what would the amendment be?
To take out the 24 hours and no manufacturing or industrial processes to take place within the buildings except between the hours as stated in 25, which is the fallback position if you take out the first line of 1.3.
So just to be clear, referring to paragraph 1.3 has 3 bullet points. The first says that the variation of 25, as it's currently written in this report, would allow any 24-hour operations to be restricted to internal only 7 days a week. That would come out.
That would come out.
And then you're left with basically all restrictions being the entire site being restricted to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Mondays to Fridays, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturdays, and not at all on Sundays and bank holidays. And that includes deliveries and dispatches. So just, is that correct? Is that, and just to be clear, members, the difference there between that and the current wording of condition 25 is it extends the hours from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, and from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturdays. That is the change. Thank you.
Before I bring back the local members who both want to say something, I'm going to ask Councillor Tony Braddon what she'd like to say.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I was only going to say that I would second Councillor Lambert's proposal, and I think it's most unreasonable to expect to have 24-hour working next to residences. We've got similar situations in my own ward. The planning officers will be well aware. They're always being called out. The compliance officers are always being called out, and these places become a real nuisance for residents. So I think the residents come first.
Councillor Greening.
Yeah, sorry, Tony. Would you mind removing your seconding, because I was going to propose refusal of the application to go back to the original one? Would you be so kind to do that, please?
I'll withdraw that comment, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Why do we need an amendment to this? Surely it's a straight yes or no?
Yeah, sorry. So now we don't have a seconding to a motion. Can I propose refusal, which I think Councillor Vickers is going to second?
Could I ask on what grounds, please, Councillor Greening?
On what I have here, that the negative impact of the development would on noise and disturbance would outweigh the benefits. Is that acceptable? Noise and disturbance.
Excuse.
Can't hear you. Sorry.
Can't hear you.
The original proposal was seconded, so we should go to the vote.
She withdrew her seconding.
Chairman, point of clarification. I think there was a proposal, an amendment to the recommendation proposed by Councillor Lambert, which I thought was being seconded by Councillor Bradnam, which needed to be taken. But if Councillor Bradnam has withdrawn her seconding, then Councillor Billy Greening's proposal to refuse comes first. Am I not correct? And for clarification on the reason for refusal, significant harm, Chairman? And Councillor Bradham, you are happy to withdraw?
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Clearly the motion put forward and seconded, so we will need to move forward with that, and obviously it's members' view in terms of whether or not the details of the condition as set out within paragraph 1.3 are sufficient or not. When members are voting on this motion, I would say, and in response to Councillor Minto's comment, that it is within the rights of members to consider whether a further amendment to that condition is reasonable and whether that would address your concerns. So it is within your remit to consider whether or not you would amend the hours or you would remove the 24-hour element as Councillor Lambert put forward. So that is a possibility for you to do today. But clearly the motion's put forward, excuse me, to refuse it. So we do need to vote on that. Thank you.
What I do need, though, is I need it written down in front of me so I know exactly what I'm asking everybody to vote on, please.
I have some wording here based on what I've heard. So that is the proposed alteration to the hours of operation, excuse me, would result in a significant harm and a negative impact on the amenities of neighbouring occupiers by way of noise and disturbance that would not outweigh the benefits proposed, contrary to policy 33 of the HDPF.
So just to make sure we are voting for that.
Excuse.
For refusal.
Sorry, the motion needs.
Right. You've all heard what the officer has said, and we're now going to go to the vote. All those in favour of voting for a refusal, please raise your hand.
Should we not be given an opportunity to debate this amendment?
Once an amendment's put forward, you need to vote on it immediately in accordance with the thing in the time.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I'm not sure that everybody has spoken on the original.
Well, they didn't put their hands up. I was looking around. So, voting in favour of a refusal, please raise your hand. And those against? And any abstentions? So, the item is refused. Thank you very much. Do we have speakers for the next one to come in? Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to resume. Thank you, everybody. Agenda item 13, DC 21 0312 10 Fay Road, Horsham. Over to you, Guy.
Thank you. This application relates to a detached bungalow on Fay Road within the built-up area of Horsham. The existing property is shown in the middle of a photo with the green garage door, with neighbouring bungalows to either side. The application proposes various extensions and alterations at ground floor level and roof level. So this is the front elevation of a bungalow with the existing on top and proposed at the bottom. As you can see on the right hand side is a hip to gable roof extension, and at ground floor level a side extension to form a new porch. To the rear elevation, again you can see the hip to gable roof extension on the left hand side and a full width single story rear extension, and the extent of a single story extension is shown by the grey box on the plan on the right hand side. And for completeness, we have the existing side elevations on the left and the proposed side elevations on the right, with the proposed side elevations primarily showing the new single story rear extension. As originally proposed, the scheme included slate roof tiles and a blue coloured render. Following concerns that these materials would jar with the immediate surroundings, amendments were received to retain clay roof tiles and to propose a light grey render colour instead. This amended scheme is considered appropriate in design terms and would not result in harm to visual amenity. In terms of neighbouring amenity, the greatest depth of the extension is set away from the northern side boundary of number 11, which is at the top of the slide, and the depth of the extension which is present would not be of a scale which would lead to any unacceptable harm. To the southern boundary of number 9, an additional representation has been received, specifically in relation to paragraph 6.7 of the committee report. This paragraph, which is on page 98 of the agenda, essentially set out that the side-facing window, which is shown in the left-hand photo, was a secondary window to a lounge, which was also served by windows to the front and rear of the property. The neighbour has though since confirmed that it's the only window to a lounge, and therefore that paragraph is incorrect. So the photo on the right shows the relationship between the side elevation of number 9 on the left and the application site on the right. And for clarity, it's this hip which is being extended out to form a gable. So there will be an increase in height and massing along the shared boundary which that window fronts. It is though considered that given the existing relationship between that window and the application site, and the fact it's northerly facing, and the unaffected outlook which would be retained to the front and rear of number 9, that any impact on this side facing window would not be of such significance as to warrant a refusal of planning permission. In terms of the rear extension at number 9, the presence of a neighbouring addition to the back of number 9 would largely offset the additional depth at number 10, such that no harm would come from the rear extension. So the application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Chairman, sorry to cut across. I didn't spot it in the report. It's clear now. The applicant is not the same as the address, and now I've realised that the applicant is a near neighbour of mine who I know of. And I think I better withdraw. I wouldn't say that I know them extremely well, but I think for transparency I better step out. So I've only just realised and seen the address on the 7 line.
Okay,
Realised, so excuse me.
We'll get someone to get you back after this is finished. We have 2 speakers. Mr. David Turley, would you like to take the microphone? You have 2 minutes, Mr. Turley.
Good evening. I live at number 9, and as you can see from the pictures, the proposal is to build a gable end wall, which is about 18 foot tall, but only 6 foot from my lounge window. Now, the current BRE guidance recommends a 45-degree rule. This is about 62, so it well exceeds the guidelines for overshadowing. Currently, the roofs are pitched in opposite directions, and this allows light to enter the side windows of both properties. they're actually only 4 feet between those two gutters. They're actually very close. Now, the report issued by HTC Planning Department in relation to the loss of light is incorrect. In paragraph 6.7, it states that the side window is a small secondary window and the room is served by the front window and a rear window and a roof light. Now, this is completely incorrect. Nobody's actually looked at it. There's a solid wall between the kitchen, which is where the roof light and the rear window is. So there's no light getting to the end of the end of the lounge. So that is the only light where the dining area is. I'm not actually objecting to the footprint of the extension. It's just that side gable end, because it's going to make such a difference to our light coming into our lounge. You could easily actually do the development without that gable end wall. And that's what I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turley. Mr. Tony Mail, next please.
Good evening, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me, can you? Yep. Okay, I'm Tony Mail and I live at 29 Fay Road, which is directly opposite number 10 Fay Road, and I am objecting to the planning application. Bungalows in Fay Road were built in circa 1950s, 60s, and all followed a pattern whereby bungalows were separated from each other by attached garages. That is, with the exception of numbers 9 to 10 Fay Road and numbers 29 to 30 Fay Road, where living accommodations are alongside each other. The sloping roofs of the properties allowed a great deal of natural light into the living quarters via windows installed for that purpose. The result of this planning application, were it to be successful, will reduce natural light for the occupants of number 9 Fay Road, as they will be confronted by a vertical wall meters from their living accommodation. The application appears disingenuous, as plans submitted only refer to ground floor extensions to the property. However, a floor plan is missing, and there appears to be a clear intention to build 2 further bedrooms at first floor level. Due to a floor plan missing, those presented are unclear. For example, how many Velux type windows are due to be installed in the front sloping roof? Is it 5, 6, 7? Who knows? The number of Velux windows is completely out of character with all the bungalows in the road and would directly affect my privacy. And indeed, one of the Velux windows is directly above their snug at the front, which has got a window in its own right. I think you already discussed that changing the colour of the roof to brown, which I was going to mention. So if it has gone to brown, then this would be good for the road, because it will actually keep it in character with the rest of the bungalows in that road, where there's been many tastefully completed extensions over the years with loft rooms and what have you. To conclude, this is an insensitive planning application which would be better suited on a modern estate and not on an existing established estate.
Thank you. Guy, what did you say before I go?
Yeah, just to clarify the roof lights to the front. So on this plan at the bottom, the 2 roof lights, the 2 lower roof lights would essentially serve the ground floor room to create like a sort of ceiling void, and the upper floor roof lights would be within the roof space. So it's correct that we don't have a proposed first floor plan. We've got a proposed ground floor plan which doesn't propose any new staircase to access for loft space, but we didn't request that simply because future internal alterations wouldn't need planning permission in their own right, so we can't control the future insertion of a staircase or whether that roof space would create additional accommodation. The likelihood is it would, because why else would you extend the hip to gable? But in terms of the impact resulting from that, it's not something which would justify refusal of permission. In terms of the impact on the side window, so number 9's on the left, there's clearly an impact from the extended gables, because the wall will extend up in this space here. So it's not a loss of sunlight because it's north facing, so it's a loss of daylight. And it's ultimately a matter of judgment whether that relationship between the extended application site and that window is harmful. And the view of officers is that it's not causing unacceptable harm simply because of the existing relationship between the side window on the left to number 9 and the application site, which already has an impact, the fact it's north facing, and the fact that other rooms within the property will still continue to benefit from unobstructed outlook to the front and rear of the building. But I do appreciate that's a subjective matter.
Thank you. I'll bring in the local member as the other one has withdrawn from the meeting. Councillor Peter Burgess.
Thank you. Can you go to 6.2, first line? Front extension to include the creation of a 920 centimetre deep front porch. Do you know what 920 centimetres is? It's about 30 odd feet. Now, we went and looked at this quite small building and there's not room, so I presume that's an error.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say it's the grey slither there at the front, which is
sorry, I can't.
It's on the front elevation. It's this is the porch here,
right?
Which is a 92 centimeters deep. Yeah,
92
centimeters deep.
Yeah, not 920. Fay Road is a nice road, and as your speaker has said, it's generally full of very similar bungalows of the type you can see there, with one exception. Do you have a photograph of number 33, which is round the corner? No, it's fine. Number 33, if you look at the map, is round the corner coming now towards the main road, which is Ashley. And that has been extensively rebuilt with gables and things, and in light grey. And I must admit, it looks really nice. So I can see the problems for number 9, and I think that we should have a look at that to see whether the problems with that window going through to the lounge can be, what's the right word, obviated, made easy, possibly by amending some, what's going to cause a major problem is the gable above it, isn't it? Yeah, I'd like somebody to have a look at that, but I'm really sorry, though these are all nice little houses for people who don't want stairs. Some of them have got lofts already, and some of them will be going to what number 33 looks like, because there is spare capacity for this. So I'm sorry to say, but I think this is okay, but I would like a condition of some sort, and I don't know that I can say it, that we do look at the problems between number 9 and the gable next door. Sorry? I don't know what I'm asking for. That's why there's officers there and I'm speaking to them.
So the only way you could achieve that is to delegate approval to the head of development with the intention of securing a light assessment, perhaps.
Okay.
To show the impact of gable end on that window, and that's perhaps in consultation with local members prior to any decision being issued.
Okay, I'm quite happy with that. I know it doesn't look good for the house opposite, but the house opposite is quite a long distance away, so I would like that put in if we can.
Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. I actually was going to suggest that we defer for a light assessment on that window.
So just be clear, we're delegating for approval subject to that, or are we deferring it?
I think Councillor Burgess's suggestion was to delegate approval.
Yeah.
So if that's a motion put forward and seconded, then obviously we can vote on that one.
Happy to second that, Chairman.
They are very similar.
Councillor Utan and Councillor Minto. So I'm not sure who was first, because obviously I don't have 180 vision.
I'm sorry, I have no idea what you said. I couldn't hear you, Guy. So please can you repeat whatever it is that suits Councillor Burgess?
Yeah, so it was to delegate approval to head of development, subject to the receipt of a light assessment to show the impact of the gable end on this window opening. So it's essentially quantifying the harm, because at the moment it's subjective as to whether it's okay or not. it would probably have to be a BRE assessment. So it's a building research establishment have got good practice on how you measure light impacts. So it'd have to be in accordance with that to quantify what the impact would be. So we can actually see what the existing light entering that window is and what the proposed light would be if this development goes ahead.
Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. It's probably covered by the light assessment request, so that's great. But it's just a point of clarity. I thought I heard that you said that there's no grounds for refusal on the grounds of light because the lounge was served by 2 other sources of light. But the resident has said that isn't the case. So, or did you say that there's light coming into other parts of the building, not necessarily the lounge?
Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Fletcher.
I'm also troubled by the effect of the light on the neighbour, given that the original decision to approve this was based on a misapprehension about what the light would be in the building. And I'm concerned about the idea that we delegate with a view to approval subject to a light assessment, because if it seems very likely that if the light assessment is, say, marginal, there's not a lot you can do about it beyond changing the plans to move back the gable wall or change the pitch, change the roof line. So I think that the suggestion to defer and then possibly give the applicant an opportunity to do a light assessment and then go away and redesign their layout if the light assessment is looking bad or marginal would be preferable to delegating with a view to approval.
I'm going to go back to the local member on that. What are your views?
Shall I assist?
Yes.
I think the options open to you is to defer the application, which means that when the light assessment is done, it brings it back to committee for you to consider that, or to delegate approval subject to the receipt of that. And obviously that can always come back to committee in any event if there are issues, but I think that's the suggestions being put forward for your consideration.
I will amend my amendment.
I hope someone's noting this.
I'm being barracked from behind, which I find very off-putting, to a deferment pending, etc., etc. What I want is that if we do find that there is a major problem there, that we get people to just alter it so that number 9 is not bound to have some problems. That's just life.
And seconded as well. Councillor Lambert. Oh, I think Councillor. So just to make sure, we're recommending to defer pending a light assessment. Okay. All those in favour, please vote. All those against? And any abstentions? The item is carried. And finally, moving on to the last item on the agenda, which is Unit 3, Blatchford Close, Horsham. There are no speakers, so we have the officer presentations.
So this application relates to a premises in Blatchford Close, which forms part of a larger Blatchford Road key employment area. The close comprises a series of single-storey commercial units in various uses, including electrical contractors, sign makers, and bathroom fitters. So the application relates specifically to Unit 3, which was last occupied by a tenant with elements of storage, workshop, office, and retail uses. The application seeks a change of use to allow for microbrewing on the site with an associated ancillary tasting area and retail use. And the extent of a tasting and retail element is to the bottom right corner, which is essentially behind the roller shutter door on this photo. So the proposal would retain a commercial use in a commercial location, and the extent and scale of the proposal would be sufficient to prevent any unacceptable impacts on neighbouring amenity or the highway network. So the application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Thank you. There are no speakers. There are no local members. Both have given their apologies. It's only on the agenda because it's on land that's owned by us. Does anybody really want to have anything to say about it? It provides more employment for somebody. Yes, Councillor Ritchie.
Well, given there's such a strong tradition of brewing in Horsham and this district, I recommend this for approval wholeheartedly.
Thank you. I'm sure you're not the only one. Okay, we have to do the formal part. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Anybody against? And any abstentions? This ends the first meeting of DM North, live ones since last March. Good night, everybody. And that's rattled through that in 2 hours. We should have a bet on that, Emma. We should have a bet on that.